Good morning again. Good morning. This is Love Month. What's love got to do with anything? Today we're going to talk about what's love got to do with romance. Every once in a while a book comes along in your life that completely transforms how you think about something that was vital to you, something important. Of course, The Science of Mind was one of those books for me, radically changed my vision of the universe and my place in it and spirit itself. But the book I'm sharing with you today radically changed my whole perception about relationships. And that book is called We by Robert Johnson, a Jungian analyst. He wrote 3 books. He wrote several, but 3 books that go together. He, she, and we. I have recommended We to many couples in counseling, and they have come back and told me it saved their marriage. I've recommended to young couples before they got married, and they decided not to. No, that's not true. That's not true. This is about, and he uses the story of Tristan and Isolde, which I'm not going to go through today, but if you get the book, it's fascinating. And then he talks about it and how that story of star-crossed lovers relates to us in our modern-day relationships. But it's about how romantic love entered Western psychology as an expectation of marriage and relationships. See, it's a fairly recent addition to our collective unconscious. The idea of romantic love burst onto the scene in the Middle Ages, and the reason I'm speaking about it today is because what we call being in love is actually a spiritual experience. I mean, let's back up for a minute, though. For most of human life, marriages were arranged. And most of us Western people, girls and boys, when they're young, find that abhorrent, right? Oh my gosh. But 2 families, parents, usually have a son and a daughter, and they would decide that this was a good match for the families. And whether the kids liked it or not, they were going to be married and create this larger family. So being in love was not even part of the equation. And by the way, this book is mainly about heterosexual relationships, but I believe it applies to same-sex couples as well. I think it's all about energies, and it's about the missing feminine in everybody, men and women, and our search for it in the other. So during the Middle Ages, something called courtly love was widely practiced. And it appeared in literature through the love poems of the troubadours. The model was of a brave knight who worshipped a fair lady as his inspiration. Quoting Johnson here, he wrote, "She was the symbol of all beauty and perfection, the ideal that moved him to be noble, spiritual, refined, and high-minded." But in our time, we got it all mixed up. We mixed courtly love with sexual relationships and marriage when it was never meant to be that at all. So I'm going to look at our own experience first, and we'll talk about this courtly love as a movement. It was really fascinating. Isn't falling in love the best feeling in the world? Oh, come on, you know it is. Falling in love with love is falling for make-believe. There's so many great songs about it. And we want to bask in the glow of it forever. Remember that other song from Carousel? The woman says, "I know how it feels to have wings on your heels and to fly down the street in a trance." Shauna could sing this. You fly down the street on a chance that you'll meet, and you meet, not really by chance. And that's just how it is, the serendipitousness of it, the magic of it, the being in love. This is called ecstatic transcendence. Nothing in the world compares to it. We are in the rapture of being alive. You never feel quite as alive as you do in that moment. Now, there are other moments of aliveness, of course, when you hold your child for the first time or you care for a parent. There's all sorts of aliveness. But this one, there's no match for it. It's unique. And it is addictive. Because falling into love is a real spiritual experience. Now, think about the word falling. And I'm not talking about falling off and hurting yourself, but free falling is unshackled, free movement, joy. It's like flying, right? Everybody has flying dreams. That's the dream of freedom. So we're relieved. When you're in that in love stage, you're relieved from the binds of ordinary life. What are the old sayings like, nothing else matters and everything matters more than it ever did when you're in that state? Because you have a heightened, transcendent awareness of yourself. Okay, so we get addicted to the falling in love part, but not so good at the relationship part. And so we move from one partner to another. Or we suffer in silence, longing for romance again. And just about every magazine you can pick up has some article on keeping romance alive in your relationship, doesn't it? It's almost always about being more alluring if you're the female, or in some way sexier, or more proficient in that area if you're the guy. I'm telling the truth here, right? So, in the Middle Ages, there was this group called I never can pronounce this right because I can't remember how to. It's Cathars, Cathars, whatever. They practiced courtly love as a spiritual experience. They would intentionally fall in love with someone unattainable. Perhaps that person was already married, or they were too young, or they were too high in society for them. There was some reason they could never actually be together, but they were madly in love. Heightened sense of ecstasy. So the love was a passion of the highest energy, holding the couple in its thrall, and the reason it was so powerful was because they never consummated it. I'm going to share something very personal with you now that I wasn't intending to do, but I will because I had this experience. I had the experience of falling madly in love with a gay man who fell madly in love with me. We were so perfect for each other. But, it wasn't ever going to happen, right? But the thrall we were in, we would speak in unison. We would think of the same things at the same time. We understood each other. We read each other's minds, and we played and played and played like children. I wouldn't have missed that for the world. And it was the saddest thing in my life and heart-wrenching, painful, but it was the best experience. One of the best, most significant experiences I've ever had. And he says the same thing. We're still great friends. All right, so because they never consummated it, the relationship never moved beyond transcendence, okay? If they had found a way to be together, it would have become what Johnson calls the stirring the oatmeal and taking out the trash relationship. And, yeah. But it remained as a spiritual experience because they saw each other as the perfect embodiment of all things good. It was the experience of projection and reflection. So, in the way he describes it in his book, it's a male and a female. Doesn't matter what it is. He says that he projects onto her the feminine. He sees her as the goddess. The goddess, right? But that projection is reflected back to him, and his feminine is awakened, and that's the noble, the high-minded, the more spiritual, the more loving, compassionate. He sees himself in her eyes, she sees himself in his eyes, and they both just feel fabulous. His feminine has been activated, and so she sees him as the knight in shining armor. The Catholic Church heard about these guys doing this. You can imagine. And they demanded a cease and desist. No more spiritual experiences for you guys, right? Which is really weird when you think about how they feel about having sex before marriage. I don't get it. The whole thing's kind of confusing. Anyway, the practice went underground. And that's when it began to seep into our psyche. He says it began to seep into our collective unconscious as how relationships should be. They should be highly romantic. She is the goddess and he is the knight in shining armor. But here's the rub. Since the whole thing is a personal experience, the projection and reflection of one's own divine feminine, the illusion of perfection in the other must be maintained or the romance is gone. So when couples marry, and he discovers she's not a goddess. She's a real-life woman who snores. She has moods. She burps. She sleeps with her mouth open. And he does the same thing. He withdraws his projection without even knowing he's doing it. She is bereft. He doesn't look at her anymore with the eyes of devotion. And that's when she no longer feels like a goddess, and she sings, "You don't send me flowers anymore." The honeymoon is over. How many of you had buyer's remorse about a month after you finally got together? It's kind of a deep-seated sadness of, this is not what I thought it was going to be, right? Who is this guy, right? So he will begin unconsciously to scan the horizon for a new goddess. Of course, depending on his character, he may never stray from the marriage, but there will be a wound in his psyche. He has lost his own feminine. He may pour his energy into his work. She resigns herself to the duties of keeping a home, and someday she will pour her energies into her children, or perhaps a career or community work. But they're both deeply wounded. And Johnson said, this is the great wound of Western culture. We all have it. We have been demanding that our partner make us feel whole, when only we can do that for ourselves. I'm going to read you something right out of the book. This book, every page is highlighted. I did a class in it once. I think it was one of the best classes I ever did. He says, the courtly belief that true love can only exist outside marriage is still with us today, unconsciously affecting us more than we know. A man expects his wife to take care of the children, have food on the table, contribute to the family income, and back him up in the daily struggles of human life. But some other part of him wants her to be the incarnation of anima, the holy lady in the sky who is always beautiful and perfect. This is why rich people have separate bathrooms. I'm not kidding. Keeps the romance alive. He wonders how the pure and shining goddess whom he adored turned into this ordinary wife who seems utterly unreasonable. A woman sees her husband working, paying the bills, getting the car repaired and defending his empires, living the ordinariness of life. She wonders what happened to the knight who adored and worshipped her when he was courting her in the days when everything was so intense, so ecstatic, so blissful. The old unconscious belief returns to haunt them, whispering that true love is somewhere else and that it can't be found within the ordinariness of marriage. Holy cow, right? And all of us have been affected by this. I was listening to Sunday morning this morning, and they were talking about romance and Valentine's Day. I heard something that I thought, that's it. They were talking about, of all people, Alice Cooper, you know, the guy that used to eat chickens. But he's been married to the same woman for 43 years, and they're blissfully happy. And they asked his wife why this marriage is so great after all these years. And you know what she said? Because he still pursues me as if I'm not his. I went, oh, God. that's it right there. And maybe for the partner to pursue him as if he were what you've been waiting for all your life still, right? Yeah, I love that. Okay, so love is more than romance. Love is what often grew from arranged marriages. Some of those marriages were the best because they turned into real devotion, respect, compassion, a real partnership. They stayed together for each other to bring out the highest and best in each other. In the wedding ceremony that I wrote, I asked the couple to, quote, care for and tend to your own inner life. For only as you each continue to grow spiritually can you bring a whole self into this marriage. And only from wholeness can you give your very best. Johnson wrote that for both men and women to look honestly at the beauty and potential in romantic love, but also at the contradictions and illusions we carry around inside of us at the unconscious level. The great error in Western thinking has resulted in a patriarchal culture devoid of the feminine, where only half of our psyche is thought to be of value. We're wounded. Spirituality heals that. Enough regular meditation, does many things, but one of the things it does, it tends to balance out the masculine and feminine energies. If you need more feminine, you get it. If you need more masculine, you get it. And it comes in forms that are very unique to you. When I first started meditating, I was just so awash in femininity, so subjective. I could hardly think straight. I was empathetic. I could feel everybody's feelings. And then it started to clarify my mind when I started meditating and did it every day for years and years and years. I began to have more direction. My mind sharpened up. I could understand difficult concepts and stuff. Put it together, I became more whole. Not that I'm all the way there yet, of course not. But sometimes I think I am, but I'm not really. But it tends to balance you out. Spirituality tends to awaken what needs to be awakened. Okay? What's lying dormant in us? The great error in Western thinking that has resulted in patriarchal culture has given us this great wound, and spirituality can heal it. So as we practice the tools of awakening, which is meditation, contemplation, solitude, right thought, forgiveness, and compassion for ourselves and others, we begin to feel the power that lives in us and the wholeness that we are, the complete self that we are, how capable we are of loving deeply. Every person in this room has a heart that is so capable of deep loving of people that we don't even know just because they're alive. I believe that in order to heal our own relationships and our own world, we need to love humanity regardless of how it looks. We need to love humanity as the expression of God, as the individualizations of God, and that there is a deep heart that everybody can develop. Love is, as Ernest Holmes said, the most powerful force in the universe, bringing things together that belong together, and we all have full access to it. Love is something we activate in ourselves, and then when we are, and after we activate it in ourselves, only then are we really ready for a full partnership with somebody else. To bring, you don't become one when you become a couple. It's two whole people creating the third thing. The third thing is the relationship. But you're still two separate whole people bringing uniqueness into it. Each valuing themselves to the point that they have something to give, something to share. So, the power that makes all things new is love, and love is God, and God is love. And so it is. Let's go within. Once again, we turn within to that beautiful realm of being that we call by many names, which really is only one name: love. Love that brings together everything that belongs together and maintains them in harmony and balance, like a dance. That power lives in us. It's the I am behind every action, every thought, every feeling. It's the joy that we knew as children that is still there, alive and awaiting our activation of it. So we turn within simply to acknowledge that that power is right where we are all the time, every bit of it, all at once, all the time. It never withdraws, it never withholds, and it has no opposition. It has one thing in its mind, and that is to express itself by means of us, to reveal what it is through our life. And what is it but love? Love and joy and vitality and supply and creativity and intelligence and peace. All these make up being. And they are ours to use. But the greatest of them all is love. For everything else is contained in it. And so this morning, let's deepen this. Let's take it personally. Take it out into the world as the way we see each other, the way we treat each other, which is our true religion, and allow ourselves to be seen and known for who we really are. Love in action. Say it out loud. I am love in action. We truly are, So we leave here today with some kind of new resolve to be more authentic, more real, more the way God intended us to be. Happy, healthy, wealthy, whole, expressive, celebrating, creating, having fun, healing lives, beginning with our own. And with all this comes peace. And so we simply leave here today with deep gratitude. Deep, deep gratitude for what's possible, what's real, and who we are. We let it begin again. From the inside out, I am love in action. And so we are, and so it is.